intro, and I want to welcome everybody to our webinar today and to our monthly webinar series. My name is Judy Browse, and I'm the Executive Director of the North American Association for Environmental Education, and we're really thrilled that you could join us. And, whoops, let's just make sure this is working. Okay. And luckily today we are focusing on the connection between nature and poetry and how the written word has such magic to it to create emotions, tell a story, and make us all think and feel. And we are really, really lucky today that we have a very special guest who is an expert on poetry and nature, and it's Aimee Nezhukumatathil. And I'll introduce her in just a minute. But she will be speaking about The World Grows in Me, Learning to Write Nature Poetry, with a nod to Wendell Berry. And I want to thank all our affiliate co-hosts, North Carolina, everybody else on the webinar for co-hosting this in your states and your regions. Really excited about having you all be a part of this. And as many of you know who have been part of our monthly webinar series in the past, we are trying to bring different topics to the forefront. Different leaders, different ideas, different ways of thinking, anything that can really help us all improve our practice and the quality of work in our field, but also to think about what we can do to be even more transformational in what we're trying to do in society. So really happy you could join us. And our next webinar is on June 28th, and it's all about bringing research to life. And it's talking about what's going on with linking research and practice at NAAEE, and the same with the Children in Nature Network, with a lot of wonderful speakers. So I hope you can join us for that one as well on June 28th. Many of you know how to use Zoom, but I just want to highlight it again that all the lines are muted, so you need to send us messages, if you would, through the chat function. And you can send them just to the panelists, Aimee and I and Kristen and Max, or you can send them to everyone, and we'll be monitoring the chat room. So throughout the whole presentation, please type your questions in the chat room, and Aimee will answer as many as she can throughout and at the close. And also post any links or make any other comments that you think everybody that's listening would enjoy. That would be great too, to make it even more interactive. So the chat is the way to communicate with all of us. If you do have any technical problems, please email Kristen or Max, who are fantastic and are the behind the scenes helping to make sure this runs smoothly. Kristen is our research and program manager, and Max is our technology guru until he goes off to college to get his master's. So if you have any issues, just email both of them. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker, someone who has done such a great job of linking writing and poetry and the work we all do to help connect people to nature and the environment, and that's Aimee Nezhukumatathil. I met Aimee actually at the Phillips Gallery, hi Aimee, in Washington, D.C., and she was reading original poetry linked to this outstanding collection of nature paintings, which were on display at the gallery. The Phillips had invited her to pick 4 or 5 of these paintings, write a poem about each. She was amazing. I loved what she had to say, bought a book, was completely hooked, and she graciously agreed to do a keynote at our conference in Madison, and I know some of you heard her there. And since then, she's built such a great following with the whole environmental ed community. So Aimee was born in Chicago, Illinois, to a Filipino mother and a father from South India. She attended Ohio State University. Go Bucks, because I did too. That's great. We have that in common. Where she received, that's probably the only thing we have in common, Aimee. I can't write poetry. Where she received her BA in English and her Master's of Fine Arts in Poetry and Creative Nonfiction. And she was awarded the Diane Middlebrook Poetry Fellowship at the Wisconsin Institute for Creative Writing at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. She's currently a professor of English at the University of Mississippi's Masters of Fine Arts program, and her newest collection of poems, Oceanic, which just published with Copper Canyon Press. She's also the author of a forthcoming book of illustrated nature essays called World of Wonder, coming out in 2019. And she's written 3 previous poetry collections, Lucky Fish, At the Drive-In Volcano, and Miracle Fruit. She's also the poetry editor of Orion magazine, and her poems have appeared in the Best American Poetry series, American Poetry Review, the New England Review, poetry, plowshares, and tin house. Her honors include so many different things, including a poetry fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Pushcart Prize. And if anyone saw it, one of her poems was recently published in the New York Times on May 4th, which was very exciting. Before I turn this over to Aimee, I just want to show a clip of Aimee talking about her recent book that just got published. So bear with me for a minute as we link to the YouTube video.
Oh, I watch it too.
I love this.
Oceanic to me is one of those large words that encapsulates the world, but also a sense of the abundance and bounty of love that I wanted to put out there in the world, especially in a time of facing darkness, of not feeling safe on this planet. A couple things motivate me: the conditions of this world and wanting to kind of record it, just to celebrate its beauty and its existence, and also to say that, hey, I too have a voice in this. This brown girl from Chicago also loves the outdoors too. Never let me see the dolphins leaping into commas for this water prayer, rising like a host of paper lanterns in the inky evening. Let them hang in the sky until they vanish at the edge of the constellations, the heroes and animals too busy and bright to notice.
Take it away, Aimee. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Judy. And I just feel like we, you said you don't think we have much in common, but actually I think we do so much besides the Buckeye connection.
My mother is from the Philippines, so she speaks Tagalog, and my father is from South India. So
yeah, I was like, I hear myself, but I'm not moving my mouth. Yeah. So anyway, I feel like we had this instant kinship right away. When there's a big signing line, you meet so many people. But I feel like with you and we zoomed in right away. Just from our shared enthusiasm for nature, but also for getting the appreciation of nature into the writing classrooms as well. So anyway, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you all so much. I want to make sure that we pack in a bunch of things into this hour together. We've probably got about 45 minutes of just jam-packed chatting and different prompts for you to try on your own, and just some things to think about. And so I can send you off with some journaling ideas and things like that. And then I also want to leave some time for some questions at the end. I know I'm seeing some of you that I recognize here on the chat. So if you see my eye turning that way, I'm trying to keep up with the chat there. But thank you so much. It's so neat to see everybody else. So I have to give a shout out to Alexandra. I see you from El Salvador. So good to see you. And everywhere from Colorado to San Francisco. It's so incredible. And I'm here in Oxford, Mississippi. So I just love what Zoom does. All right. So what we will do here is I have a couple things. I just wanted to kind of start off, in terms of, I know many of you are old pros at this, and then some of you who just want kind of some kickstarts or a kick in the pants for your own writing, and then some are just really brand new, some who have no writing experience whatsoever, but who want to try to encourage your students to kind of get writing about the outdoors. So I'm trying to, put this talk under one big umbrella for all of you to leave with some concrete ideas for. So what I wanted to kind of do is just to give a little bit of background in terms of how I got into this. And I wanted to just mention too, as you'll encounter from many of your students, or maybe many of you were like this, I was a voracious reader, but my kind of dark secret is that I wasn't reading literature. I was reading, which is weird to say for an English professor, I know, but I was reading books of, the shells of the Great Barrier Reef, or the hunt for the giant squid, all nonfiction and science books, basically. And they would get me so excited I would be lost in them. And still, that's my idea of a good time today. It's actually, I realize how nerdy that sounds, but just coming through and reading some new discovery about the planet. But as a little girl, I do very palpably remember getting so excited, getting to the end of this book, and then turning around to see who is this person that I felt like I had such a connection with. They were always white authors. More specifically, they're almost all white men. And this was, late 70s, early 80s. And, and thankfully things are changing, but I just want, especially the educators out there, to know like how much I kind of internalized that. So I didn't even realize how much I was internalizing that, but I think throughout the rest of my childhood, it was almost like the secret thing. Like I couldn't share my love for the outdoors. I couldn't share how excited I was and how much I knew the names of things when I was outdoors, because I was always shamed into this kind of situation. Like maybe Asian American girls are not supposed to be outside, or maybe they shouldn't be, maybe it's not good form for them to be expressing wonderment or joy at the outdoors, because I just simply never saw it in any book I read, and I read a lot of books, any television special that I was watching. There was just an absence of people of color, specifically women of color. So it didn't stop me completely, but I think there was so much of it that I was internalized, like I should not be doing this. I guess I'll do what my parents wanted, which was pre-med, because at least I saw people of color in that field, So I think one of my biggest takeaways, hopefully one of your biggest takeaways, and I'll keep coming back to it throughout, especially for the educators here, is that, and I mentioned this a little bit before in Madison, those of you who saw me at that conference, as educators, what we present to our students is a value judgment. And what that means is if we're saying, look at these incredible authors, look at these incredible scientists, and they're all white folks, then you're definitely telling anybody in the room, including the white folks, that it's only the white voices that matter in the world of the outdoors. And it's 2018 now, and we need to show that people of all backgrounds and all different for me it was race, but all different socioeconomic class backgrounds, orientations, that they all should be having a vested interest in this planet. So I would just ask you to kind of choose your texts and choose your your options for science projects. Anyone that you give. I just saw this the other day with my 5th grader. He had a list of scientists to study and do research on. There wasn't a single woman on there, let alone, I think, George Washington Carver was on there for science, and that was it. And that's basically kind of the same list that you can imagine I had in the 80s. So I would just put a very special kind of awareness on that when you're in the classroom. So I wanted to kind of transition a little bit from that into kind of, I moved around a lot when I was a kid, and one of the greatest gifts of reading so much and having parents that were kind of present is that I never felt lonesome because I knew the names of things when I was all over the place. So if I was in rural Kansas or in, eastern Iowa, I can look up at the sky and identify constellations and not feel alone. Even if I was the only if my sister and I were the only Asian American girls in the school. And I had names for things like Catalpa, like Chuparosa. I could identify most rocks, things like that. But I never had anyone to share that joy with. It was always so shamed. So, the writer Mary Oliver, amazing poet, Pulitzer Prize winning poet, she has a list of 3 things that she likes to say. And I have it on the top of all of my syllabi. And that is pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it. And I think it's very easy in this day and age of social media to tell about it now. And I think mostly we can tell people to be astonished. I can tell students to be astonished. But it's the kind of pay attention and unplug that is the hardest part, I think. So with that in mind, I wanted to kind of maybe ask a question to you all and see, just to kind of ask, because I know there's so many backgrounds here, but where and how does nature fit into your life as a writer or an educator? Is it something that you've kind of always been afraid of? Is it something that you've always just loved, but you haven't been able to put pen to paper? Is it something that, you've been starting fires outdoors since you were 4, and you feel very much at home in the outside more than even you are inside? Is it something that you feel like that's a place of recharge? Is that a place where you feel terrified to be? I guess I just wanted to see if you could just chime in on the chat here and just kind of talk about like, what is your relationship to nature, or how do you see nature fitting into your life or your writing right now? I'll see some of them right here. Oh yes, thank you. Please call out that a lot of environmental writing is whitewashed. Yes, definitely. Oh no, someone's saying the litter, noticing litter on my walk to work. But someone, oh yes, that's probably, Christina, that's probably the number one thing I get, is that so many people have had experience with being outside or playing in nature as a kid, and then just something happens where you just kind of forget about that wonderment, or you just don't have time, or things like that. Pamela, I love that you say that being Native American, nature is my teacher. That's great. South America, nature is a huge part. Yeah, that's so great. Use nature writing as a break from your corporate job. Oh, fantastic. Someone's working for a safari park in Nebraska and focusing on native species. Oh, wonderful. You're all my people here. So great to hear from all of you. And someone here is talking about camping with a child, with a daughter. Heather said that. Oh, great. Yeah. So that's really the kind of one of the things I've noticed too, is that I know everybody has different, different time constraints. So what I would say, in terms of, and again, I had parents who worked, so they weren't around a lot, but when they were around, they made sure either we were outside all together or that my younger sister and I were outside, just to have that connection. I just finished up a big whirlwind National Poetry Month, and I can't even tell you, visiting different high schools and even elementary schools, how much of just our kind of what I thought would be our shared language is kind of evaporating from young writers, like talking about a mosquito bite, or catching poison ivy, or stepping in mud, or getting bitten by something, anything. A lot of students actually, I have realized, don't have that situation. They literally have not been bit by something like a mosquito bite, or a spider, or just having any of the so-called like kind of dangerous or negative kind of run-ins with nature, because they simply, it's not because, oh, they were able to avoid them. They simply, while being outside, or they use sprays, that kind of thing, they just simply were not outside. So that's one thing that I also noticed, as well as as a teacher of environmental literature and nature writing, the sheer number of students that are actually able to be outside and to have that kind of vocabulary, basic vocabulary for being outside, is dwindling. So those of you who've said that you've spent a lot of time outside, or even just you do take notice of things, I would say just get pen to paper. One of my favorite things, and that's the hardest part, is just getting pen to paper. One of my favorite things about writing is that it's relatively cheap. One of the cheapest of all the art forms. You literally need a notebook and a pencil. I like, what I give in my nature journaling classes and my advanced poetry classes, is I have one of these. It's I call it a commonplace book, but it's a blank book essentially. And it's hardback. You can get one of these for $6. It's not very much, but you can get cheaper ones. You can get a 50-cent kind of composition notebook. I prefer ones without lines, but it's that and a pencil. I love, because I'm such a sucker for school supplies, I love Blackwing pencils. Look at this gorgeous eraser. So that's my thing. But again, just any pencil. You don't need any fancy equipment. And it's just a matter of what I call one of my favorite writing exercises for those of you who have very brief pockets of time. You say, look, this is all great in theory, but I have no time for this, or I don't have time to squeeze this into my curriculum. You could do what I call, here's the first of the different writing prompts. This is called the 3 or 30-minute ramble. And I would say to put it on your calendar just as you would a dentist appointment, or violin lessons, or whatever kind of things that are filling up your daily calendar. To put it in there, try for maybe once a week. see if you can get it into 3 times a week. And again, it could be 30 minutes. You could block off. The beauty of this is that you can block out how much time, but get it in your calendar so it becomes something that you are actually looking forward to. Your to-do list should not be just a series of things that are drudgery. Your to-do list should also be joyful things. So in this 3, what do I mean by ramble? I wanted to read this quote from a former Orion contributor named Robert Pyle, a wonderful nature writer. And he goes, this is what he said in the April 2015 or 2005 issue of Orion about what it means to ramble, to walk about. Not that a ramble afield makes everything okay just like that, but going out alert and open causes some chamber of the heart that has temporarily drained to pump again. You can remember that you can harbor loss, hold tight to sorrow, and honor grief while still rejoicing in the rich gifts of the earth. In a world deeply flawed, this is no small potatoes. And I think back to something that Toy Derricott, a poet, one of the co-founders of Cave Canem, said when she was receiving her a big award at the National Book Awards. And she said, particularly in this day and age, joy is an act of resistance. And I think that is such a powerful statement. Joy is an act of resistance. When turning on the news or reading the latest reports of here's another species that's going under, or here's another decrease in the world's firefly population, one way to combat that, something that's very concrete and very palpable that you can notice immediately, is to insist on joy, insist on finding that joy in the outdoors, and to kind of capture on the page what is out there. So in this 3 or 30-minute ramble that you put on your appointment calendar, I would say to, just carry a little notebook around. It doesn't have to be a big notebook the way I have. I have a smaller one for these purposes. You could throw in your backpack or in a pocket. And I would say just make a list. Especially for those beginners, you think you don't know a whole lot about nature, but I would make a list of everything that you notice from the outside, and maybe see if you can make a list of names of things, plants and animals, trees that you do know. I bet the answer would surprise you. And I think you'll find that the more times you put your 3-minute ramble on the calendar or your 30-minute ramble on the calendar, the list is going to grow and grow and grow. And maybe tear out that page and tape it on your refrigerator and just add to it. Have your whole family add to it as the weeks go by. And if you don't know a name of a plant or a bird, see if you can just do some loose sketching. What I tell my students is this is not art class. Nobody has to see this but you. But see if you can render the shape. You should be able to be able to render the shape of a leaf, something so different as a tulip leaf, the tulip tree, versus just like a sugar maple leaf. See the best you can, even if you don't know the names of those 2 trees, you'll be able, everything is so fantastic to be able to look up your drawings and try to match it with a field guide online, or you can get a field guide for plants and trees in your area for like $2 used, things like that. I would recommend the latter because I'm old-fashioned like that, to have a field guide nearby. But that's really kind of how you learn. That's how you stop being kind of afraid of the outdoors, is by putting names on things. And what I love too about doing these little 3 or 30-minute rambles is that you can go with a group. There's no age limit. You can go by yourself. It's never too late in life or too early to start. I've been doing these rambles since my kids could walk, and I still do them with my aging parents, with my elderly parents. So this is something that is very, very universal, whereas a lot of sports, a lot of instruments, after a while you need a lot of money to do this. No, nature writing and nature journaling, you don't need that. Also make note of the nature around you in cemeteries, airports, bus stops, malls. Notice I'm calling out places where there's a lot of concrete and a lot of kind of building. So if you are lucky enough to be in a place that has a lot of nature around it, a lot of unspoiled nature, great, that's also fantastic. But I run into so many people who say, look, I'm in airports all the time, or I'm at bus stops and that's my one chance of being outside. You can still notice what's going on. And if nothing else, even just out from your windowsill, I know some people can't get around, get out and about, but here's my other thing. If you're bedridden or if you just are surrounded by buildings, here's number 2, prompt number 2. I want to see, here's the question that I would pose to you to write down in your journals is, can you learn to read the sky? Can you learn to read the sky? And the answer is yes, everybody can. I learned to read the sky when I was 4 years old. And that's something that, you know, I mean, if my 4-year-old can learn the words to a Bruno Mars song, he can remember the names of, there's 10 basic cloud shapes. And so some of you, this is absolutely second nature to you, but some of you never heard these. So what I would say is if you can learn to read the sky, not just necessarily just determining cloud shapes, but you can learn to kind of sketch out and now again, find on the web or find in books, the 10 basic cloud shapes. And once you learn these 10, reading the sky becomes so joyful. It doesn't become miserable. It doesn't become something that you just like forget as you're walking to and from the bus stop. So here they are. Here's the 10 basic cloud shapes. Cirrus, cirrocumulus, I should know this by heart. I should test myself. Stratus, those are my son's favorites, both of my sons. It's very dense and layered, heavy stratus clouds. Stratocumulus, altocumulus, cirrostratus, altostratus, nimbostratus. It sounds like it's a lot, but again, once you digest these, you'll know them for the rest of your life. And here's the big one that almost everybody knows, cumulus. Everybody knows cumulus clouds. Cumulus are the ones that are the big poofs of cotton candy, the ones where people laying on their back can say, oh, that looks like an elephant, or oh, that looks like a puppy, or that looks like a baby floating in the sky, something like that. So cumulus are the ones that are the big fluffy clouds. So certainly you'll have seen those. And then the ones that are extra scary, storm clouds, cumulonimbus. So I feel like just having that language of 10 basic cloud shapes, think of them as 10 friends. When you're walking outside, you can make a note of, that's something that you can put a name to. You could put a name to things that you see in the sky, and that can be just a simple secret between you and the clouds, you know. I also would say, along with that reading the skies, what smells or sounds do you notice as you're observing these 10, looking for any one of these 10 basic cloud shapes? And yes, you could actually see some of these, more than one shape of cloud in the sky too. So this is a lot of info, I know, but if you look up 10 basic cloud shapes, you will, it's like having a friend for life. They'll be with you till the very, very end. And it's something to also help you not feel lonesome about as well. Again, being the only Asian American family and waiting at a bus stop with my younger sister, you know, I mentioned reading the constellations. Well, we couldn't do that in daytime, but we could always look up and figure out the clouds and just know that, oh, these are the clouds that we saw in Kansas, or these are the clouds we saw in Phoenix. That was so helpful. And it's also just a great life skill to have. I'm going to pause for just a little bit from the different prompts. And I wanted to kind of mention, let's see how we're doing on time. I wanted to also mention just a couple things. I wanted to read a little bit for you. And it's the power of, I wanted to turn back to, I mentioned that nature writing is so great and rambling is so great by yourself or with a friend. But there's also something great about bringing a child into this, either your own or insisting that your elementary school has a little bit of time where they go outside, your local elementary school, or to volunteer at a church or a Boys and Girls Club. Something where they have a guide who they also can model getting excited, you know, about nature right in front of them. If they don't see adults in their life getting excited about nature, it's really hard for them to get excited about nature. And I will tell you this, I have a very stoic Indian father and a very fairly stoic but boisterous Filipino mother. But seeing them outside and seeing them get so excited about seeing a new carrot or a tomato plant or seeing a new bud on a succulent made me realize, like, gosh, I have to also get excited about this too, because I wanted to emulate them. And I know if I didn't have parents like that, thank goodness I had neighbors or even babysitters who were so excited about the outdoors. And my parents never plan this, but it was just a direct result. You're looking at a direct result of having a lot of adults in my life who got excited about and who were very vocal about preserving the outdoors and also getting out and naming the outdoors as well. I wanted to mention, I have two little ones that, by myself, and I wanted to read just a small section from an essay. This is kind of a found essay in some ways. These were questions that I took notes from when I was birding on the National Audubon Bird Count Day last year. And this is called Questions While Searching for Birds with My Half-White Sons, age 6 and 9, on National Audubon Bird Count Day of Oxford, Mississippi. So these are questions I wanted to point out, and just also, none of these were kind of prompted. These were all questions and wonderings about the world while we were just outside going on our little ramble. Okay, if we're gonna look for birds all day, Mommy, is anyone gonna be looking for us if we get lost? I thought you said God has his eye on every sparrow, so why are we counting when he already knows this number? Is there a bathroom nearby? Mommy, why won't you let me bring my telescope? There might be birds flying way, way, way up there, but we can't see them and we'll mess up the count. Why do lady cardinals look so sad and boy cardinals look like they're going to a party? Is it because boy cardinals have to learn how to dance so they will be popular? Someone at school said bees are going missing, and if we don't see any more bees, we're going to go missing too. Is that true? Mommy, I don't want to be missing, but if I do, can I be missing with you, Mommy? Then I won't be so scared. What about Daddy? I don't want Daddy to be missing. What is camouflage? If I wear red and stand next to a cardinal, would you be able to see me, or would you only see the cardinal? But isn't that scary for the boy cardinal? They can't camouflage on anything except a red wall or my red shirt. Lady cardinals are actually very lucky. You can hardly see them. Mommy, you are like that cardinal because you are brown. Why do you have better camouflage than Daddy? Right now, I have medium camouflage. But will I be brown or white when I grow up? Why do some white people not like brown people? Don't worry, Mommy. You can hide in the forest from those bad people. You have good camouflage. Can I have good camouflage too, even though I'm mixed? At school, we have to hide under our desks in case of bad people. We did that last week. It's called lockdown. We have to be quiet like what we're doing now when we wait for birds. Mommy, are there people who will hunt kids? If hawks are circling around us, does that mean they think one of us might be good to hunt? Mommy, is there a bathroom nearby? Why is the redbud tree not called a purple bud tree? All the flowers are purple. It makes no sense. Do hummingbirds ever get tired from flying and just want to swim and float in the water once in a while? Is there anything for them to snack on while they're flying above the ocean, or do they just snack on air and pretend it's a flower? If I saw a bunch of turkey vultures looking at the house with their wings out, I would think something very scary is going to happen. Remember when we watched that lady put a tag on a hummingbird? I bet he didn't like that, and when he got to Mexico, the other birds laughed and asked, "What's wrong with your ankle?" Then another lady painted a bird on my face, and you made me wash it off at night. I was very sad. Mommy, do birds have eyelids? Do they ever close them when they fly? Do they know how to wink at us? Because I think I saw a brown thrasher wink at me, but I didn't tell anybody. Mommy, is there a bathroom nearby now? What happens if there's a bird count when I'm 40 and we don't find any birds? Will you be missing when I'm 40? Will you be missing when I'm 50? Mommy, what if there were 100 more green birds in the forest right now and we just didn't know it? And they were all camouflaged and watching us with our notepads, and we couldn't see them, and they were giggling and telling each other our bird count is all wrong. Birds don't giggle, do they? But what if they are winking at each other then? Okay, I just wanted to thank you for just indulging me on that small little bit. I wanted to just kind of show you, again, that was all unprompted. That was just kind of me furiously taking notes down during this bird count. And I just wanted to kind of showcase that I don't at all claim to be a scientist or anything. And this was happening when there was a lot of shootings in the news. Sorry, I'm getting choked up thinking about it. And my husband and I thought we do so well of kind of hiding kind of the scary news from our kids, but I just wanted to showcase that just being outside with a kid, that was the first time we had ever talked about anything like that. That was the first time we had talked about brown skin that versus their kind of mixed skin. That was the first time we talked about what it means to be on lockdown, and this all came out of birding. So I just wanted to kind of mention this as just another way of showcasing the importance of being outside and to, yes, express joy, but it's a way, I think, to unspool from the internet. It's a way to unplug from the internet, and just that unspooling that happens when you don't have devices with you and you just are absorbing and kind of taking stock of the world around you. I wanted to mention too, back to that kind of notebook, and this is something that kids or grown-ups can all do, is it's based on a book called Keeping a Nature Journal, and I'll talk about this a little bit later at the end. There's a slide that has all the authors and the books that I mentioned. But it's a way to kind of just give you guidance on, okay, I have a notebook, I want to be outside, I can't really draw very well, but what now? What I would say too is to kind of figure out a plant that grows nearby. In this case, in Mississippi a few weeks ago, there was just an overabundance of azaleas, and I didn't really know much about it. I knew that it was an invasive plant, but I wanted to kind of do some history about it. And you can see, I'm going to show you my kind of really sad azalea bloom, and that was just based on like a 20-minute exercise that I did with my own students. So again, we're taking note of the clouds, we're reading the sky, but also we're taking note just to make a quick sketch of an azalea flower. And I asked my students kind of, to figure out the flower. This is another prompt here, to use this flower as a kind of a study of an origin story for yourself. So to connect, even if you're not from, that area, in this case, Mississippi, to connect how you got to this area by way of the flower, to think of it as an origin story or a song of home, and where you end with this flower. And what was really interesting about the azalea in particular is that it's pretty toxic. And when bees make honey from this, it's known as mad honey, so I love that phrase, mad honey. And I thought that was really just an interesting kind of concept to trace. How did I get from Chicago to Kansas to Iowa to Phoenix to Western New York to Ohio, all the way to Mississippi by virtue of the azalea? So that was something that I posed to my own students, is how would you describe your origin story through a flower that you find in your area? And also, how would you describe the sound of an azalea blooming, or a magnolia, or whatever flower that you choose? How would you describe the sound of it blooming? I know it sounds a little kind of crazy, okay, flowers don't have a sound, but if they did, how would you describe it? Okay, all right, I wanted to kind of do something a little bit in terms of switching gears a little bit, another prompt that involves indoors, again, because I know not everybody has access to the outside. Or if you're like me, for 17 years, I lived in Western New York, and for most of the time, I could not go outside without getting horizontally rained on or iced on. So there is something, I apologize in advance to people who have something called trypophobia. I actually have a little slight case of that. So this shows how much I adore you all, that I'm willing to kind of forego that in order to do this writing prompt. But Judy, can we pull up the video of the Suriname frog? Toad, I should say. You could watch this just for a little bit.
Yep, parenthood can be a drag. The kids get under your skin, and you just want them off your back. Literally. These Suriname sea toads are finally breaking free from mom. And those holes? Those are her back. Her offspring have developed from eggs into frogs underneath her skin. And now it's time for them to move on, leaving her a little cratered. Boy, and you thought stretch marks were bad.
Okay, so aside from the questionable, like, sexist comment on the at the end about stretch marks,
Sorry, I did it again, didn't I?
You never know.
So sorry, Amy.
it's okay, it's all right. We'll pause that. Great. So yeah, so trypophobia is the fear of holes in nature. So like several holes all together of the equal size. So some seed pods have this. The Suriname toad is the #1 thing for it. I should have set that up just a little bit more to prepare people because like my husband, who I consider one of the bravest people I know, refuses to watch this, or if he does, he just a tiny clip. So I apologize. But yeah, the Suriname toad, when it gives birth, is really kind of out of this world. And so this is some metaphor work. This is what I would call kind of writing, again, all levels. If you are a seasoned poet, a seasoned writer, then consider this like, exercises for you. But I would say this is what I would call metaphor work. When you find something outside and you have to kind of learn how to describe it via metaphor, a direct comparison, to someone who had never seen this. So specifically in this case, I would say to describe that leap of the Suriname toad babies, how would you describe that leap without saying the word leap? And I would also ask you to push it further as to what else can you compare the leap of a newborn Suriname frog to? Like, what other leaps are there? If you can meditate on the word leap, L-E-A-P. But really just if you can kind of capture that mother's back, what it is like to have those pods, those kind of baby frog pods on the back. See if you can describe it. I would say a full page, margin to margin. Don't worry about this being a poem as of yet, but just pure description, a pure description exercise. How do you describe something so kind of wild and out of this world almost in some way? And how do you make it, how do you create a sense of joy in some ways in describing this? Again, without using the word leap. So I would say when you meditate on that word leap, I would say maybe connect back to some memory where you yourself were taking some jump. It could be a metaphorical jump. It could be like a leap of faith on something. It could be a leap in a new job, a leap in like an actual physical leap. When you were trying to cross a bridge or a creekside leap that you were trying to, and you didn't make it, for example, or the first time you ever jumped off of a high dive. See if you can connect it to the personal. But first, do that pure description of the Suriname toad. Okay, and that's going to be also available, so you can watch it on loop as many times as you want later. All right, or not. What I also wanted to kind of showcase a little bit is I wanted to do my second prompt, which is based on another picture. So this one is more of a field, but there's a little bit of background to it. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Judy. So this is a field of lupine flowers, but this is also kind of one evening's worth of tracking fireflies in a field. And I have those of you who saw me during the keynote last few years ago know what I'm going to say a little bit about this, but I have a special connection to fireflies. Not only is it something that I basically can't extract them from my childhood, they were so tied in with me, but I wanted to mention too that as I go into different schools, I usually do some sort of insect writing exercise, and I wanted to mention something real quick here. Oh, is in terms of the firefly itself, it is a bug that is slowly disappearing. Hopefully that there will be a resurgence of them. But due to chemical use and light pollution, the populations are decreasing all over North America. I wanted to kind of have you meditate on a summer outdoor memory, and see also what kinds of memories get conjured up just from this picture here. For me, fireflies are very, very special, but it doesn't have to be fireflies that you write about. It could be any insect. So something about summer, something about an insect that happened in the past, some memory that you connect those two with. I will tell you though that I want to mention this little part here. I'll read just a small little part before I go on about this. So I mentioned I go and teach poetry to elementary schools and high schools as well. And I use the firefly, one, because I'm super familiar with it, but two, it's a way to conjure up childhood and summertime and sensory details of the outdoors. So that's sound, texture, the feel of a firefly. There's always one kid who crushed a firefly. That's kind of heartbreaking. Someone's mentioning Casey Musgraves. Yes, I love that song too. Now you got me thinking about Casey Musgraves. I heard some kind of noise in the background. It was like a rowdy class of fifth graders. And when I asked them to, listen up, pay attention, they said they weren't trying to be rude. They just they thought I was making up what a firefly was. So that was kind of stunning to me. That was kind of a big kick in the pants for me. So in a class of 22 students, 17 had never seen a firefly. They completely thought I was just making this insect up. So I asked them what they did for fun in the summertime. For me in the Midwest, I had kickball, tag, riding bikes, basically anything until our parents called us in at sunset. But their answer, you can guess, was being indoors in the air conditioning, being indoors to play video games, being indoors to have movie marathons. So I actually had to bring up a video of fireflies for them to look at because they thought I was just making this bug up. So again, 17 of 22 had never even heard of a firefly. So when I talked earlier about many of them, we were losing some common language. I had mentioned something like a simile, like the swell of a mosquito bite. Many of them had never even been bit by a mosquito because they're just hardly outside anymore. So they had never had one glow in their hands. They had never tried to capture one in an old empty jam jar, So I wanted to kind of go back to, if you are lucky enough, it's just starting now here in Mississippi, but if you are lucky enough to be in a place with fireflies, use that as a prompt to bring a kid out there, or just go out and stay and make your appointment during that kind of crepuscular time. Make your ramble so that it coincides with fireflies. Or if nothing else, just sit and stare at an insect for a while. Just really get used to that quietness of unplugging and looking at insect movements. See if you can get close enough to see the mandibles or their wing. And again, see if you can connect that to a personal memory in any way, shape, or form. I find that even just writing margin to margin and having a page of that in a day brings us back to that connection, even if we can't be outside at that moment. I'm here on a college campus, and the number just in the last decade of students who actually look at you in the eye as we're switching classes is almost, you can count on one hand. And that I'm on the flagship school of Mississippi. But at any given time, I could probably count less than 5 people that make eye contact with me. Not because this is a mean place, it's actually one of the friendliest places I know, but it's because everybody is plugged in or they're looking at their phone while they're outside. So I would just say again to implore you to, when you're outside, instead of and I had to really unlearn this myself, when you're waiting for something or standing in line, to take out your notebook instead and try sketching or try recollecting some sort of summer memory, that kind of thing. There's a lot of kids who don't know what a roly-poly bug is, who've never had the sensation of catching it in your hands and rolling it up. So you will be hopefully not the case, but one of the last generations to have those memories and not just looking at things on YouTube. So whatever I can encourage you to just actually be outside or to take note, again, make it that 3 times 3 times a week. Start with once a week, and then see if you can make that ramble happen 3 times a week, even if it's 3 minutes. I would say, like, what can we do to connect the idea of wonderment to our lives now today? The best thing you could do is to model wonder and curiosity yourself. If you are educators and you're not out there drawing, or you're not out there with a pair of binoculars, what are you doing? Students will soak that up, that energy right from you. I know what flora and fauna my students are interested in, because that's how I ask them to tell me about it. I ask them to have that conversation, not what the latest music video is or what latest Twitter beef is going on, but what have they seen? What have they noticed lately that inspires wonderment and that astonishment that Mary Oliver talks about? We have the privilege and the honor of being here to so many kids, either by being parents or teachers or even just neighbors or a friendly face. And kids watch us on how to be modeling some shape of a life. Those of us who've spent any time outdoors could take time to share kindling and spark to ignite a kid's curiosity. And I hope that you don't forget what that's like to be that kid catching fireflies, or to do, if you never had that experience, to go ahead and make it a point to, I'm gonna learn 2 flowers this week. I'm going to learn to identify 1 tree that grows in my city this week. Even just small steps like that, so that the world has a name to it. It doesn't become this nameless thing. So I think I'm going to pause there for right now, and I want to make sure that I have time here to answer questions. And Judy, I'm not sure if you had some final wrapping up moments for you as well.
Yeah, let's see if there are a couple of questions. Kristen and Max, do you want to ask a question that has come in?
Sure. Here's a question for you, Aimee. What is your best advice for writing about natural resources for a highly diverse audience? For example, a proper balance of science, aesthetics, and fun.
Well, for aesthetics and fun, I would, can you repeat that question one more time? I'm sorry, there was a lawnmower going on in the background.
Sure. So the question is about writing for a very diverse audience, finding a good balance of science, aesthetics, and fun.
Good. I think the science can always come later and indoors, in some ways, but I think it's that fun that I just think there's no substitution for being outside, getting a little bit dirty, tromping through mud or climbing a tree, smelling a flower up to your face, that kind of thing. There's just no substitute. And again, this is coming from someone who read, who still loves to read. But to have some sort of interaction. So it's not enough to just be outside, but I think it also makes a huge difference to keep some sort of record, to keep some sort of journal. My kids, thankfully, and actually I'm embarrassed to say I didn't start this. I borrowed this idea from my kids' preschool teachers, who were very adamant. And again, we were in Western New York, but even in the snow, they said, make sure they're wearing snowsuits because we will go outside. Even when their environmental literature professor was not going outside, my kids were going outside. And that was the best kind of training for them, that they were expected also to, like, if they found a nut, they would draw it in their own scribbly way. So some sort of interaction and some recording. I feel like that active recording really makes a world of difference from being just a passive observer to someone who's actually taking note of what's there, and also what may not be there. I know my students who I've been in communication with them for, some of them over a decade, and they're noticing just the sheer lack of robins in springtime, whereas, gosh, they'll say, Professor Nez, remember when we went out in 2005 and there was a field of robins? I haven't seen a robin in so long and it's already May, things like that. So just making it be as interactive as possible. And also, here's another thing too, that even my grad students, I think some of them resisted it, is to get back to the artists we all were. I think when you look in the kindergarten classroom, people just grab paints, they grab markers with such zest and joy. Nobody cares if they're good, so if you can just get a pack of, like, I have these little like drawing pens, less than $5 a pack or 99 cents for Crayola. Get a pack of those, throw them in your backpack, and see if you can get back to that joy of recreating what you see outside in a journal it's such a beautiful record of it. So again, trying to be as interactive as possible.
Aimee, one more. Elise wrote about advice you have for those who are so concerned about every single word and have analysis paralysis of how do you break through on the writing process?
Good. Yeah, the poet William Stafford says something like, we're all poets to start out with, and I know some students balk at that, some grown-ups balk at that, like, no, I don't have any creative bones in my body. Kids talk in metaphor. Kids are just fearless when it comes to expressing their feelings, and they have such beautiful instances of metaphor. So just the other day, I was chatting with a first grader who was, instead of saying, I feel happy today, he said, I feel like I have cotton candy in my pockets. And there's no cotton candy in his pockets. That if and I want to share some with all of you. It's maybe kind of not the strongest metaphor, but I love that exuberance of joy. And this is a little boy who the teacher had said previously was super quiet all week. But when we started talking about describing things, describing emotions, describing what you see, I didn't have to teach them metaphor. I have to teach my college students metaphor, so that's something that's really, I would say it's easier said than done, but just think of just sheer description. And I would also say one easy small little tactic is to forget the box of Crayola crayons. See if you can invent colors. So instead of saying something like, oh, the sunset is pink, pink is in a Crayola box of crayons. So I would say just be audacious in your naming and say like the sky was the color of the inside of a frog lung, something like that. So that you're not boring yourself, that kind of thing. Again, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader, according to Robert Frost. I would also say when you get stuck, to look at anthologies like this. This is one that's backwards now. It's called Ghost Fishing. Full caveat, I'm in this, but it's an eco-justice poetry anthology. I think just a lot of times people don't know where to go to read and get inspiration from. So this is one edited by Melissa Tuckey. I would recommend this. These are all going to be on the last slide. Grey Wolf just put out this incredible collection, New Poets of Native Nations. So this is an anthology of gorgeous Native American writing, and it's just released like within the last week or so. For those who are wanting more of kind of a hands-on and a little bit more advanced, this anthology, this is a craft book called Environmental and Nature Writing, a Writer's Guide. It's edited by Sean Prentice and Joe Wilkins. This I highly recommend. I literally teach from this book, so I would recommend those books as well. But so I would say the perfect blend of getting out there as well as reading as well. So don't do one or the other. You need to do both, I think.
Aimee, thank you so much. This is so fantastic. And I've left that slide up with all those resources. Okay. And the actual chatter in the chat box has been amazing. Thanks to everybody for sharing. And, Aimee, when I first started introducing you and said, we didn't have much in common, I was actually kidding because I love words and writing and nature, and you inspire me every time I hear you. You're amazing. And the importance of hearing from voices who we don't normally hear from. We've got to change that. So I was trying to pay attention when you were talking about the importance of rambling and getting to know your clouds, to pay attention, to think about flowers and your origin, to think about the writers and books that you choose, to not just highlight white authors and not leave out women, and to always put something on your to-do list that brings you joy. So Aimee, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will be posting this on YouTube and on EE Pro. And let us know if you have other ideas. I don't think we could ever get a speaker as good as Aimee, but we'll try in the future. We hope you all can come to the conference in Spokane in October. We'd love to have you there. and really appreciate all of you weighing in. And we will save all the chats as well, because so many great resources were shared.
Say, will I be able to? I know there's so many great questions coming in, so I'd love to be able to answer those. I will be tackling those, okay, folks? My kids are coming home in about 15 minutes, but I'm going to be tackling that. That's going to be my joy tonight.
And Aimee, thank you for that. We will post your answers. And if there are any final words you want to say to everyone before we all sign off.
I would just say that, no matter how bleak things go, and I would say, they're going to get probably bleaker, is that one thing that we can do is to insist on beauty and insist on joy, even when the powers that be would rather us not. I think the powers that be get very nervous when we have a love for beauty and when we have a love for joy. And that's one absolute way that we can kind of fight back in our own way, is to insist on and to kind of say, this is something that's important to me. I'm going to fight for it.
Thank you, Aimee. Great closing words. And everybody have a great afternoon. And Aimee, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Have fun learning about the cloud names. I'm going to go try to find some right now too, and I'm going to go to the bus stop to pick up my kids. Thank you.
Thanks, Aimee. Bye-bye.
Bye.